That was my grandpa's $1.5 million home she destroyed. He built it after coming back from World War II. Karen claimed it broke HOA rules. What she didn't know. I'm the police chief for her entire county. My grandpa built this place with his own hands after fighting Nazis. Now it's just broken wood and dust. All because some HOA Karen thought it didn't match her perfect neighborhood. She got the bulldozers here yesterday. Too bad she has no idea who I am. I'm Sheriff Mike Donovan. I run law enforcement for this whole county. And I don't forget when someone messes with my family's legacy. Marjorie Winters became Westridge HOA president 8 years ago. People call her the clipboard queen because she's always walking around with one, writing down violations. She lives in the biggest house on the nicest street. Drives a white Mercedes SUV with a personalized license plate that says Bylaw 5. I'd seen her around before. She'd left notices on my grandpa's mailbox about unapproved exterior colors and non-conforming landscaping. I ignored them all. The home was built decades before her precious HOA even existed. It wasn't under her jurisdiction and she knew it. But Marjorie couldn't stand anything she couldn't control. A historical home built by a World War II hero? That didn't fit her vision of perfect suburban uniformity. She's been planning this for months, my neighbor Tim told me. At the last HOA meeting she was talking about eyesores and property values. Everyone knew she meant your grandpa's place. What really made me sick was finding out she'd waited until I was at a 3-day law enforcement conference in the next state. She thought I wouldn't be able to respond quickly. She thought wrong. I pulled up her file on my computer. Marjorie Winters, age 54. 2 speeding tickets, both dismissed under suspicious circumstances. Divorced 3 times. Former real estate agent until her license was suspended for administrative violations. Now she ran the HOA like it was her personal kingdom. Well, her kingdom was about to fall. And the sheriff was coming to make sure of it. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Everyone wanted to know what the sheriff was going to do about his own property getting bulldozed. Reporters. County officials. Even the mayor called to express concern. Nobody had ever seen me this angry. I need all the paperwork, I told my deputy. Everything she filed to get this approved. And I want it on my desk in an hour. 2 hours later, I was looking at the fakest demolition permit I'd ever seen. Marjorie Winters had forged signatures, used a fake inspector name, and marked my grandpa's property as structurally unsafe. She'd even backdated the inspection to make it seem like multiple warnings had been issued. The whole thing was illegal from top to bottom. This inspector doesn't even exist, I said, tossing the papers on my desk. Ray Donaldson from County Office of Emergency Code Compliance? There's no such person. There's no such office. I called the county records office. Hey Sally, it's Mike. I need everything on Westridge HOA. Every complaint, every fine, every dollar they've collected for the past 5 years. And I mean everything: board meeting minutes, financial statements, violation notices, all of it. That's a lot of paperwork, Sheriff, Sally said. I know. And I need it yesterday. The next morning, I parked my sheriff's cruiser right in front of Marjorie's perfect suburban home. Her house was exactly what you'd expect: manicured lawn, decorative flags, and a live, laugh, love sign visible through the front window. I watched through my sunglasses as she peeked through her curtains, probably wondering why the county sheriff was parked in front of her house at 7:30 a.m. I just sat there drinking my coffee, letting her sweat. The records arrived in 6 boxes. I cleared my schedule and locked myself in my office. What I found made my blood boil. Marjorie Winters hadn't just targeted my grandfather's home. She'd been running the HOA like her personal piggy bank for years. Boss, you need to see this, said Deputy Garcia, pointing to a spreadsheet. The HOA paid $25,000 last year for landscape maintenance to a company called Wingreen Services. I looked up the business registration. Wingreen Services is owned by Daniel Winters, her brother. We found dozens more examples. Pool repairs billed at triple the market rate, paid to her cousin's company. Security system upgrades that never happened. Special assessments for road work that was never completed. I interviewed homeowners who'd been bullied into compliance. Mrs. Jenkins, an 80-year-old widow, in tears telling me how Marjorie had fined her $100 per day for having the wrong color mailbox. The Rodriguez family, who were threatened with legal action for having a basketball hoop in their driveway. She targets people who can't fight back, said Tom Wilson, a former HOA board member who resigned in protest. If you stand up to her, she makes your life hell. But the smoking gun came when we found a recording of an HOA meeting from 3 months ago. Marjorie's voice, clear as day. That eyesore at the edge of our community is driving down property values. One way or another, it's coming down before summer. She was talking about my grandfather's home. A decorated war hero's legacy. A $1.5 million historical property she had no authority over. I made a call to the district attorney's office. I've got everything we need, I told them. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, destruction of property, abuse of power, and embezzlement. We're going to nail her to the wall. I knew I couldn't just arrest Marjorie right away. That would be too easy, too quick. She destroyed my grandfather's legacy, his $1.5 million World War II hero's home that he built with his own hands after fighting for this country. She deserved to feel the walls closing in first. Here's what we're going to do, I told my team the next morning. 5 of my best deputies sat around the conference table, all volunteers who wanted to help. We're going to turn her own tactics against her. I spread out a map of Westridge estates. Starting today, we conduct a complete code enforcement sweep of the entire community. Every property, including Marjorie's. By the book, by the law, no exceptions. Deputy Miller raised an eyebrow. Even the small stuff? Especially the small stuff, I said. That's her playbook. Now it's ours. We started with fire code inspections at the HOA clubhouse. Found 6 violations on the first day. Pool safety compliance checks revealed expired permits and inadequate emergency equipment. The community tennis courts had lighting that violated county ordinances. Every violation came with a formal notice, a fine, and a sheriff's department letterhead. All completely legal, all by the book. 3 days in, we inspected Marjorie's house. Found her fence 6 inches higher than county regulations allowed. Her garden shed built without proper permits. Her driveway widened without approval. The fines started piling up. $500 here, $1,000 there. All legitimate violations that she'd been ignoring while harassing everyone else. But I wasn't just applying pressure from the outside. I was working from the inside too. Mrs. Harrington, I said, sitting in the living room of the HOA treasurer, did you know that signing off on fraudulent financial statements is a criminal offense in this county? 5 years minimum. Her face went white. I just signed what Marjorie gave me. That's not how the law sees it, I said, pulling out the HOA financial records. But I'm more interested in making things right than punishing people who were manipulated. Help me build my case and I'll make sure the dean knows you cooperated. One by one, the HOA board members started talking. The vice president, the secretary, even the landscaping committee chair. They'd all been bullied or bribed into keeping quiet about Marjorie's schemes. Meanwhile, word was spreading through the neighborhood. I made sure of it. Anonymous tips to local reporters about the investigation. Copies of the legitimate violations left where neighbors could see them. I parked my sheriff's cruiser in front of Marjorie's house every morning for a week. Just drinking coffee, watching her curtains twitch. Psychological warfare, but completely legal. By day 10, Marjorie was unraveling. She tried calling the mayor to complain about harassment. The same mayor whose son had been fined $500 by Marjorie's HOA for having a campaign sign in his yard during the last election. Sheriff Donovan is conducting official county business, was all he told her. She tried hiring a lawyer. 3 turned her down after seeing the evidence we were building. The 4th took her money but gave her bad news. She was in serious trouble. The community started turning against her too. Years of resentment bubbled to the surface. People began speaking out publicly, sharing stories of her abuse of power. The local newspaper ran a front-page story, HOA president under investigation, destruction of war hero's home leads to criminal probe. I saved every clipping, every photo, every piece of evidence. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about making an example of someone who thought she was above the law. By the time the HOA's monthly meeting rolled around, Marjorie was isolated, desperate, and completely unprepared for what was coming next. The Westridge HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community clubhouse. I arrived at 6:30 in uniform with 3 deputies. The parking lot was already full. Word had spread about what was happening. Inside, nearly 200 people packed the room. Standing room only. Homeowners who hadn't attended a meeting in years wanted to see this one. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marjorie sat at the head table trying to look composed. Her usual supporters' seats were empty. She shuffled papers nervously, checking her watch every few minutes. At exactly 7 p.m., she tapped her gavel. I call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda. I stood up. Actually, Marjorie, there's been a change to tonight's agenda. The room went silent. Every head turned toward me. "Sheriff Donovan," she said, her voice higher than normal. "This is a private HOA meeting. You're out of order." I walked slowly to the front of the room. "No, Marjorie. You're out of order. In fact, you're under investigation for multiple felonies." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Someone in the back started recording on their phone. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her voice shook. "I've done nothing wrong." I placed a thick folder on the table in front of her. "Fraud, forgery, destruction of property, embezzlement, abuse of power." I tapped the folder with each charge. "And that's just the beginning." "You can't do this," she hissed. "This is a personal vendetta because of your grandfather's old house." That was her first mistake. Admitting she knew exactly whose property she destroyed. "You mean the $1.5 million historical home built by a decorated World War II hero?" I asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The property that wasn't even part of this HOA? The one you illegally demolished using forged documents and fake inspector signatures?" The crowd gasped. Some people were nodding, others looked shocked. I turned to face the room. "For those who don't know, my grandfather, Captain Jack Donovan, built that home after serving this country in World War II. He received the Purple Heart and Bronze Star for valor. That home was his legacy, built with his own hands." I pointed at Marjorie. "And Ms. Winters here had it bulldozed because it didn't match her vision of neighborhood perfection." "There were safety concerns," she tried to argue. "The proper procedures." "There were no safety concerns," I cut her off. "And the only procedure you followed was fraud." I pulled out copies of the forged demolition permits and passed them around. "This inspector doesn't exist. This office doesn't exist. These signatures were forged." Then I dropped the real bomb. "But that's not all. For the past 5 years, Ms. Winters has been using this HOA as her personal piggy bank." One by one I laid out the evidence. The inflated contracts to family members. The unnecessary fines. The misappropriated funds. With each revelation, Marjorie seemed to physically shrink. "This is slander," she finally said. "I'll sue you for this." That's when Deputy Garcia stepped forward with the final piece of evidence. A recording device. "Marjorie Winters," I said formally, "you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, destruction of property valued at over $1 million, embezzlement of HOA funds, and filing false documents with government agencies." As Garcia read her rights, the room erupted. Some people cheered. Others just watched in stunned silence. Years of fear and intimidation were ending right before their eyes. The county courthouse was packed on the day of Marjorie's trial. People stood along the walls, some wearing buttons that read "Justice for Veterans." The district attorney had pursued maximum charges, refusing any plea deals. I sat in the front row, my grandfather's Purple Heart medal in my pocket. 3 weeks of testimony had revealed the full extent of Marjorie's crimes. Former HOA board members testified about being coerced. Contractors admitted to kickback schemes. Financial experts detailed how she'd siphoned nearly $200,000 from HOA funds over the years. But the most damning evidence was the recording of her explicitly targeting my grandfather's home, followed by the forged demolition documents. When the jury returned after just 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts. "Ms. Winters," the judge said, looking down from the bench, "your actions represent an extraordinary abuse of power and disrespect for both the law and the legacy of a war hero. This court sentences you to 8 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 5 years. He wasn't finished. "Additionally, you are ordered to pay $1.5 million in restitution for the destroyed property, plus $200,000 to the HOA for misappropriated funds." Marjorie's face went pale. Her designer outfit couldn't hide how small she looked now. As the bailiff led her away, she glanced at me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just held my grandfather's medal where she could see it. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around me. "Sheriff Donovan, how do you feel about the verdict?" a young woman asked, microphone extended. "Justice was served," I said simply. But this was never just about punishing one person. It was about protecting what matters: respect for our veterans, respect for the law, and respect for each other's property and rights. I paused, then added, "My grandfather used to say that freedom isn't free. He paid his price on the beaches of Normandy. The least we can do is protect the legacy of those who sacrificed for us." Back at the property, reconstruction had already begun. Using my grandfather's original plans, found in the county archives, we were rebuilding his home exactly as it had been, with a few modern improvements he would have appreciated. The Westridge HOA was dissolved by unanimous vote of the residents. In its place, they formed a simple neighborhood association focused on community events and support, not control and punishment. On Veterans Day, we held a ceremony on the property. The new home was nearly complete, its fresh timber gleaming in the autumn sun. A stone monument now stood in the front yard, dedicated to Captain Jack Donovan and all veterans of World War II. The mayor unveiled a special county resolution designating the property as a historical landmark, protected from future development or destruction. Even if the neighborhood changed hands 100 times, my grandfather's legacy would stand. As the ceremony ended and people began to leave, I stayed behind, looking up at the house. It wasn't just a structure anymore. It was a symbol of justice, of standing up to bullies, of protecting what matters. Inside my pocket, I ran my fingers over my grandfather's purple heart. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered. "We protected what matters." 6 months after Marjorie went to prison, I stood on the front porch of my grandfather's rebuilt home. It looked exactly like the original, same redwood beams, same riverstone fireplace, same wide windows facing the mountains. But now it had something new, a bronze plaque by the door. Captain Jack Donovan's legacy home, protected historical site, built 1947, rebuilt 2024. The neighborhood had changed too. Without Marjorie's iron fist, people started talking to each other again. Kids played outside without fear of violation notices. Gardens grew with actual personality instead of strict conformity. I kept my promise to my grandfather. Not just by rebuilding his home but by making sure no one could ever threaten it again. The county passed what locals called the Donovan Act, a law protecting veteran-built properties from HOA overreach. Marjorie's lawyer filed 3 appeals. All denied. Last I heard, she was working in the prison laundry, probably still trying to tell people the proper way to fold sheets. The $1.5 million restitution? She'll be paying that for the rest of her life. Every paycheck, every inheritance, every dollar she ever makes again, a percentage goes to veterans charities in my grandfather's name. Sometimes people ask if I feel bad about how it all went down. If maybe I was too harsh. I just show them the only photo that survived the demolition, my grandfather standing proudly in front of the home he built after fighting for his country. She didn't just destroy a building, I tell them. She tried to erase a hero's legacy. That's something I could never forgive. And as sheriff of this county, it was my duty to make sure justice was served. As for me, I still park my sheriff's cruiser in the driveway sometimes, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the mountains just like my grandfather used to do. Some people say I should write a book about what happened. Maybe someday I will. For now, I'm just glad that when people drive by, they don't see an empty lot where history was erased. They see a hero's home standing tall. Just as it should be.